Hey guys, I want to do a very quick video to get my prediction for the Johnson versus Elliott main event fight out there, as well as the new Font versus Schnell matchup, and then kind of very quickly recap my reiterate my thoughts on the entire card. Maybe talk about one or two more fights here or there, talk about them again. But yeah, I don't want to do this video. I'm feeling very tired, but I'm here for you guys. I want to go to bed. I might nod off during this. This video will suck. And even though I just said it's going to be very quick, it won't be. I'm probably going to ramble on as usual. So I do not want to be here doing this, but I felt like I had to. So let's start with the Font versus Schnell matchup. Schnell replacing Alejandro Perez, and I picked Font in that original matchup, and I'm picking him here. Striker versus grappler matchup. As far as I can tell, Font, we haven't seen any extended periods of grappling or even brief portions of grappling from what I can remember from his short UFC career. I feel that his grappling game is still enough of a mystery that if it did get to the ground, that could be interesting. I don't know why, but I'm kind of recalling the recent Thiago Santos versus oh goodness, Eric Spicely fight, where Eric Spicely just talked mess about him going into that fight, said he didn't deserve it, he had no chance to win, and you saw a pretty talented grappler, a guy who didn't even do that well on TUF, and really looked bad in one of his fights. He had the grappling to take it to the mat and submit a guy who was an athletic, dangerous striker who had, previous to that fight, been on a pretty good streak. So, if it gets to the ground, I don't know. I would assume Schnell would have the advantage. Very active from his back. Pretty crafty submission chaser. But I feel that in general, that is not a reliable style at the elite level, at the at a mid-tier UFC level. And Rob Font should just have a big advantage on the feet. He's looked consistent. He's looked better fight to fight. He has power. Gave Lineker one of his more competitive fights in the UFC. So I think Font will keep it on the feet. Schnell's striking looked serviceable at best on TUF. I'd not expect him to have success striking with Font, over an extended period of time. So taking Font, I think he gets a late TKO, and I don't think Schnell, while he is really active off of his back and he's a very willing scrambler and pretty relentless when it comes to chasing submissions, I don't see him as a strong wrestler, at least not from his fight on TUF. And actually, who did he lose to? I remember his win, but okay, he lost to Tim Elliott, got submitted in the first round. Yeah, that's right. So, he can even be submitted, and even in his win over Matt Rizzo, he threw up a lot of submission attempts that he didn't get, and was very content to be on his back. Lost some scrambles, so it's not like even if it hits the ground that he's instantly a threat. So I'm taking Font. I think he keeps it on the feet. I don't think Schnell has the wrestling to dictate the fight. So I'll take Font by third round TKO. And then before I get to the main event, I want to quickly talk about the Hall Maynard fight again. And I picked Maynard in my original video. But I rewatched that Hall Labov fight, and that was an extremely dominant performance by Hall. It was not pretty. It wasn't even that impressive. But as far as who was controlling who in that fight, even though Labov spent that entire second round on top, and that's what I was referencing in my original video. I had remembered for some reason Labov, kind of laying on top and Hall being inactive from his back. But after rewatching that fight, Hall was in total control. He had control of Labov's position, even though Hall was on bottom. He was outstriking Labov from bottom. I don't remember Labov getting off one clean ground and pound strike, and Hall just kept throwing and landing from his back. And every time they were on the ground, every time the Hall was on his back, it was because he had pulled guard and brought the fight there or scrambled into that position. Hall completely dominated Labov. Now, if he wasn't able to submit Labov, having complete control of him for 3 rounds, that's one reason to think that he won't be able to submit Maynard if he is able to get it to the ground or get a dominant position. Because Labov, before that Ishihara fight, I'm sure everyone is going to go back on what they thought about Labov originally, but before that last fight against Ishihara, people were talking about this guy like he was the worst fighter in the UFC, and maybe deservedly so. He very well might have been, and still might be, one of the most undeveloped, greenest fighters in the UFC. So if Hall couldn't submit that guy, can he submit Maynard? I would say that he might not be able to just pull guard on Maynard like he did to Labov and just kind of lazily drag Maynard down. That was a pretty pathetic performance by Labov in that fight. By the way, just not being able to pass guard or even just get back to his feet from top position. And I don't think Maynard would, put up that weak of a fight, that much of a non-resistant effort against Hall. If Hall is, pulling guard and is content to sit on his back. But Maynard is old. His chin is not there, and I'm not at all saying that Hall's going to, crack him on the chin, but Maynard is old. I think he's shop worn. And Maynard is going to be wrestling with Hall, I think. I mean, he could keep it on the feet. But, I think he's going to wrestle with Hall, even though that's, let's say that's ill-advised, and he's going to be putting himself in position repeatedly for Hall to, get a dominant position and submit him, just to scramble with him. I think, first of all, Maynard has never, I can't think of an instance where he proved to be a good scrambler or a good mat grappler. He is a solid wrestler. He does have control when he's able to take guys down. But as far as scrambling, I can't remember one fight that proved that Maynard was a good slick grappler. I don't think he even has a submission win in the UFC, and no, he doesn't. I'm verifying that right now. So if he's going to be on the ground with Hall, him being old at this late stage of his career after suffering all those knockouts, I can just see him being really shell shocked, and Hall just very, very craftily snaking around his back and getting in a dominant position easily and quickly and choking him out. Kind of thinking of like make an analogy like the Condit Maya fight, something like that, where you would have thought that Condit would have been able to put up much more of a fight on the feet, and the superior grappler just completely dominated him. So, yeah, I think Hall has a good chance of doing that. And I'm going to be on the fence about this, right up until before the event starts, and maybe even before the fight. As long as I have to change my pick, I'm going to be contemplating this. But I think I'm still going to side with Maynard because Hall, even being in control for 3 rounds against Lobov, he could not submit him, and like I said already, that's maybe deservedly was one of the worst fighters in the UFC, if not the worst. He couldn't submit him. So can he submit a more complete veteran fighter in Maynard? Because of the athletic disparity, I would say yes, but I don't think he'll have as easy a time getting the fight there as he did against Lobov. And I know it said Maynard's going to wrestle with them, but Maynard's probably going to strike a little bit before he wrestles, and there he should have a really big advantage because Hall's striking is pretty awful. Saul Rogers on TUF dropped him with a jab, and against Lobov, he had an obvious grappler style of striking. The waiting on the outside, throwing the leg kicks, and Maynard, still has some pop in his hands. He can still brawl. His last fight against Fernando Bruno, Bruno was a much bigger threat than Hall will be in this fight, at least on the feet, and he was able to survive against Bruno, and even win the scrambles and the wrestling exchanges with him. And actually, I just said that I couldn't think of an instance where Maynard proved to be a good scrambler. Well, that last fight against Bruno, well, that's not a great fighter, a very good grappler even. That's probably one of the better showcases, better examples of Maynard's scrambling. But Bruno, I do think is a better wrestler than Hall, and Maynard was able to survive and out-wrestle him and win the decision there. So, in a way, I think Bruno was the tougher test, and at least as far as the striking goes. I don't know. Maynard, I think, is just a more complete fighter. I mean, he is. I do worry about that athletic disparity, though, as I said, and that's something that's a factor that could result in Hall very easily taking his back, creating a scramble and submitting him. But I'm going to take Maynard. I just, not being able to submit one of the consensus worst fighters in the UFC over 3 rounds, and having a very one-dimensional, limited game that has not worked against guys like Saul Rogers, who himself had a pretty one-dimensional game. A boxer wrestler, actually. That makes me think that that's going to make me pick Maynard here. So, I'm going with Maynard. I don't know, decision or TKO, but I think now I've convinced myself back into taking Maynard. All right, so talked way too long about that fight. But the main event at flyweight for the title, Demetrious Johnson versus Tim Elliott. This is just like every other Demetrious Johnson fight for the last 3-4 years since he's been champion. All these guys he's facing are good fighters, but Johnson will outclass Tim Elliott. Tim Elliott, I'm glad he's back in the UFC. Getting cut after losing to, his first fight in the UFC took Demetrious or John Dodson to a decision, and after a couple other wins, he lost to Benavidez, Makovsky, and Ali Bagotinov, all still elite fighters in the UFC. And Benavidez, one of the best lower weight fighters ever in the history of the sport, and he gets cut. I mean, that's a prime example of the complete idiocy and just a wrong decision by the UFC matchmakers. Tim Elliott was not a guy who washed out of the UFC or did not cut it there, was not good enough to be there. He was not good enough to win against the elite guys. He didn't really have a chance to work his way through the lower ranks of that division. So Tim Elliott was always deserving of being in the UFC. I'm glad he's back, and he proved it on that show, but he is not beating Demetrious Johnson. Everyone knows that. Barring some kind of miracle or act of God. I guess those are the same things, but he will not beat Demetrious Johnson. We already saw against Ali Bagotinov that dynamic footwork, that high movement style that he has, picking shots from outside that Dominic Cruz-like style of striking was rendered totally ineffective by Bagotinov. And then his grappling game is just, while he's very aggressive and very ballsy, coming out and attacking Benavidez right away, getting him in a crucifix, which ultimately led to him getting mounted and submitted himself. His grappling game is just too wild, too loose to catch a guy like Johnson. So Johnson should be the way better wrestler, and we saw against Okugibo. I know I said that incorrectly, but in that fight on TUF, he lost some scrambles, was put on his back for a bit. Okugibo had some nice takedowns, and he struggled in that fight. Had the better cardio down the stretch, and was even getting outstruck on the feet. So, there's no way against a guy like Johnson, who's just light years higher up on the on the skill ladder than Okamebo. There's no way he's gonna beat him, and I do think Johnson's gonna get a finish because I don't see, as aggressive as he is on the ground, I can't see him not putting himself in position to get submitted or just stuck on bottom and pound it out. So I'm going to take Johnson by, I'm going to say, a 4th round finish. And I think it's going to be, I don't know, submission or TKO, but 4th round finish for Johnson. Okay, so I know this video is terrible, guys, but I'm just trying to take one for the team here. Get my picks up there, keep this thing going. But I think we kind of covered everything we needed to here. We've got the 2 fights. After just looking at this card a second time and thinking about all these fights, I think this is a lot of these matchups are competitive, at least on paper, and I think other than the main and co-main event, all of the other fights I could see either of the 2 fighters winning. I think it's a tough one to call. I mean, I definitely favor one of the 2 fighters in some of the fights more than the other, but some of them, like McMahon Davis, hard fight to call, very even. Kutalaba Cannonier, that's another tough one. Even Ellenberger Masvidal, but the rest of the fights I'm going to stick with my original picks. Even the Maynard Hall fight, which I talked way too long about. Even Curran Moyle, I could see Moyle winning that fight because of how badly Curran struggled in the UFC against not great fighters like Emily Kagan, and even losing to Alex Chambers. So on paper, a really competitive card. I think a really tough one to call, but yeah, that's going to do it. So I'm sure none of you are going to waste your time watching this. Well, except for my the most loyal of my viewers out there, and thank you. But yeah, just making this to get my picks out there. That's one of the things that I kind of pride myself on with this this channel is right picks or not. I always want to be 100% transparent, and I'm going to put out a video soon recapping my picks for the last several events. I'm currently 5'11" overall in the world for the year on UFC Fantasy. So you guys know my goal. I want to close in and finish within the top 500, and that'll make it 3 years in a row. And of course, I will not say that it's going to happen because you just don't know. You make the picks to the best of your ability, and then you just let it play out from there. But I'm hoping I can do that, and I'm going to put a video showing you the evidence, my picks for the last couple of fights. Usually I would do that before my predictions, but I think that takes away from the time that it makes the video longer, and I kind of want to try and make my videos shorter. So I think I might start doing separate, really quick vids, maybe a short recap of the entire event, at least for the bigger ones, or just ones where I feel motivated to do a recap for. But yeah, I think I'm going to start experimenting with that. And yeah, We got Fight Night Lewis versus what the hell's the guy's name? Abdurakhimov, as well as 206 next week, and I'll be back with a real video for that, not this shitty old webcam video, but a real video where I have some sleep in me and some energy back. And then what do we have to close out the year? 207. I think some other fight nights. Zant versus Watterson, and then 207. So it's only 2 more events. Yeah, 2 more events to close out the year after, well, 4 more events from this point. So, yeah, thank you guys. I know this is me at my laziest, my most unenergetic, but I had to do it. Yeah, that's it. So take care, and I'll see you guys soon. Bye. Good night.